Regarding economic cooperation, what economic sectors that have the potential to be explored further by the two countries for cooperation?
So Indonesia is a very important country for Canada.
In your opinion, what kind of concrete cooperation should be conducted by the two countries to restore economies affected by the COVID-19 pandemic?
So this is a very important question.
Indonesia dan Kanada telah menjalin hubungan diplomatik selama 70 tahun. Kedua negara selalu saling mendukung di berbagai forum multilateral, termasuk G20 dan Presidensi Indonesia. Indonesia dan Kanada sepakat untuk bekerja sama dalam menjaga stabilitas di kawasan Indo-Pasifik. Halo pemirsa, Anda menyaksikan International Corner ANTARA bersama saya Gracia Simanjuntak. Kanada dan Indonesia tahun ini telah merayakan ulang tahun hubungan diplomatik yang ke-70. Dan hari ini pemirsa, International Corner bersambang ke kediaman Duta Besar Kanada di Jakarta untuk berbincang dengan Duta Besar Kanada untuk Indonesia, Her Excellency Nadia Burger. Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with you today, Grace.
I hope you are well.
Yes, very much so. Very happy to be here in Indonesia. It's been a lovely experience so far, and I look forward to more engagement and of course, opportunities to visit Indonesia.
Okay. I think it's only appropriate if we start with the question, how does Canada view bilateral relations with Indonesia so far?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking. The relationship between Canada and Indonesia is strong and growing. We celebrate this year the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations, and there's a lot that we are already doing together. Obviously, we're engaged in a wide range of areas: trade and investment, political, sustainable development, and many other issues. And there's a lot we're doing, but there's a lot more we can do to reach our full potential. And that's what I plan to do during my time here.
What are the current focuses for Canada in cooperation with Indonesia, bilateral cooperation with Indonesia?
There's so many areas that we're engaged in, but let me mention, of course, the plan of action, which is our overall framework for engagement. This plan of action was signed by our foreign ministers in April earlier this year, and covered the wide range of areas we're engaged in. And among all these areas, there's a few that are very, of course, important and require our focus. So one of them is trade and investment. We are engaged and currently negotiating a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which is a free trade agreement, and negotiations are going well. This agreement will help increase opportunities for business people from both of our countries and help us grow our economies together. We're also involved and engaged in other areas such as green and sustainable development. So we're doing a lot of work together on climate change. And of course, defense and security issues also. We just signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding on Counterterrorism, and we recently had a visit of the Navy ship, HMCS Winnipeg.
Oh, okay. So those are the main focuses now?
Yes, so that's some of the focuses.
Yeah.
Again, the list is very long, and I can't list them all here given the time that we have, but those are important areas for sure.
Okay. Regarding economic cooperation, what economic sectors that have the potential to be explored further by the two countries for cooperation?
So Indonesia is a very important country for Canada. It is an important market, and there's a lot of opportunities here for Canadians, Canadian businesses and investors also. We, of course, have had a long-standing commercial relationship in the agricultural sector. We provide wheat and fertilizers and soybean and many commodities to Indonesia and Indonesians. And what's really interesting about this is that actually all of the food that is exported, food products, that are exported here in Indonesia are transformed here and either used for the local market or re-exported. So we actually contribute through our agricultural exports to Indonesian economy and economic growth. So agriculture is one area. Of course, we also have engagement in the financial sector. Manulife and Sun Life are Canadian insurance companies, and they're very present here. They hire and have thousands of employees. And we have pension funds who are very much engaged. They are investing close to $8 billion in Indonesia in infrastructure and other projects. But of course, there's other sectors we're interested in, digital, energy, and other areas.
In terms of investment, what areas of investment that Canadian businessmen are attracted to develop in Indonesia?
Well, let me say first, as I mentioned to you earlier, Grace, the CEPA, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, this agreement, once we have concluded negotiations, will offer so much more opportunities and encourage investors on both sides, both in Indonesia and Canada. And through the measures that they will provide, the certainty that they will provide to investors, we expect a lot more investment and interest by Canadian investors here. But our investments, as I mentioned earlier, our investments here are very high, and it's a very positive story in all sectors. I mentioned the financial sector, of course, pension funds. We have companies that are established here, and in all sectors, energy and other areas. So the list is very long. I won't list them all, but certainly a very positive story, and we want to grow investments here, which is also what I think Indonesia is interested in.
Okay. Last thing for this segment, Madam Ambassador. In your opinion, what kind of concrete cooperation should be conducted by the two countries to restore economies affected by the COVID-19 pandemic?
So this is a very important question. Obviously, the pandemic has affected the global community, but both of our countries, of course, severely. Thankfully, Canada is largely recovered, has largely recovered from the pandemic from an economic perspective, and our unemployment rate is very low.
Okay.
Canadians are, of course, concerned by the inflation and the impact on their purchasing power. But overall, we are largely recovered from the pandemic. This is not the case in all countries, and we are engaged, including with Indonesia, at the G20 this year to help other countries recover and be more resilient to pandemics.
Okay, thank you, Madam Ambassador. We'll see you back in the second segment.
Thank you, Grace.
Demikian pemirsa, perbincangan saya dengan Duta Besar Kanada untuk Indonesia, Madam Nadia Burger. Sampai jumpa di International Corner segmen berikutnya. How do you see the current stability of Indo-Pacific region amid the China's influence and the struggle for influence between China and US in the region?
So the region is very important to Canada. This is why we launched this strategy.
Indonesia dan Kanada telah menjalin hubungan diplomatik selama 70 tahun. Kedua negara selalu saling mendukung di berbagai forum multilateral, termasuk G20 dan Presidensi Indonesia. Indonesia dan Kanada sepakat untuk bekerja sama dalam menjaga stabilitas di kawasan Indo-Pasifik. Halo pemirsa, Anda masih menyaksikan International Corner Antara bersama saya Gracia Simanjuntak. Kali ini saya masih bersama dengan Duta Besar Kanada untuk Indonesia, Her Excellency Nadia Burger. Madam Ambassador, we shall start our second segment, and it is about Indo-Pacific issues. Okay, Canada recently launched the Indo-Pacific strategy to support long-term growth, prosperity, and security for Canadians. Can you please explain the strategy briefly?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Obviously, this is a very important strategy. Canada just released a strategy a few weeks ago, and it is really a roadmap for us in terms of our engagement in the region in the long term. And as part of this plan and this strategy, we actually have announced over $2.2 billion in terms of investment, and we will be basically engaging in a number of new activities and projects in that context. And this is really a reflection of the importance of the region and Indonesia.
Okay, moving on. In your opinion, what kind of cooperation can be forged between Canada and Indonesia within the framework of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region?
So we're already doing a lot, but there's more we can do, and this strategy will help us engage in a number of areas. It lists themes and specific priorities for engagement. Obviously, economic issues are really important for us, and we want to do more with Indonesia on that front. We have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which is currently under negotiations. Negotiations are progressing well, and we'd like to conclude this so that the benefits can grow, economic benefits can grow between our two countries, and also investors come here and go to Canada in larger numbers. And we're also actually in the process of concluding and negotiating an agreement, free trade agreement with ASEAN countries. So this is very important to us, and we want to put a lot of emphasis and priority on this. But obviously, security, defense and security issues, we want to work together for peace and stability in the region. And we want more people-to-people engagement, and of course we want to support each other's efforts in terms of sustainable and green development.
Still on the issue of the Indo-Pacific, how do you see the current stability of Indo-Pacific region amid the China's influence and the struggle for influence between China and U.S. in the region?
So the region is very important to Canada. This is why we launched this strategy, and it's really a reflection of our recognition that the region and the countries in the region, including Indonesia, have an important impact on Canadian interest, on our economy, and we need to be here and we need to be present and engage with all countries in the region. And of course we have values that guide this engagement, and one of these values are the importance of the rule of law and a rules-based international system, which really has been the source of our prosperity here in the region and globally. And we will engage in protecting and promoting these values with all countries, including large or small in the region. So that's of course an important value as part of how we will implement this strategy and engage in the region.
Okay. Last but not least, Madam Ambassador, what efforts do you think Canada and Indonesia can carry out to help realize an open and a peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific region?
Well, we share the same goals, and that's the interesting thing about Canada and Indonesia. We actually have a lot of common shared interests, and this is one of them. So we can work together for all these goals you mentioned by working more closely, concluding this CEPA agreement that I mentioned, a Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, and also free trade agreement with ASEAN. We can continue to work together, and we will support also in the context of ASEAN Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN next year. And we will work, of course, together in multilateral fora to continue to promote these important values and goals together.
Very, very insightful views, Madam Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Demikian pemirsa perbincangan saya dengan Duta Besar Kanada untuk Indonesia, Madam Nadia Burger. Terima kasih dan sampai jumpa di International Corner segmen berikutnya. The outcomes of the G20 for Indonesia was the Just Energy Transition Partnership, or JETP, worth $20 billion over the 3 to 5 years to finance domestic energy, clean energy projects. However, in the funding scheme, there is no certainty about the portion that Indonesia will receive, either in the form of grants or debts. Can you please explain this funding scheme so it doesn't burden Indonesia?
So first let me say that Canada very much welcome Indonesia's goal to address climate change under the Paris Agreement and to reduce greenhouse gases emissions.
Indonesia dan Kanada telah menjalin hubungan diplomatik selama 70 tahun. Kedua negara selalu saling mendukung di berbagai forum multilateral, termasuk G20 dan Presidensi Indonesia. Indonesia dan Kanada sepakat untuk bekerja sama dalam menjaga stabilitas di kawasan Indo-Pasifik. Halo pemirsa, Anda menyaksikan International Corner Antara bersama saya Gracia Simanjuntak. Kali ini saya masih bersama dengan Duta Besar Kanada untuk Indonesia, Her Excellency Nadia Burger. Madam Ambassador, for this third segment, let's talk about G20 issues.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
How would you comment on the G20's, the Indonesia's G20 presidency, which just ended last November in Bali?
Well, I want to congratulate Indonesia for successful presidency and successful summit. Canada, all along throughout G20, Indonesia's G20 presidency was fully supportive and working to ensure it was a success. And we supported, of course, its priorities and agenda. And of course, we had the summit here last month, and our Prime Minister was here with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of International Trade. And we're very happy to see that the communique that was issued after the summit contained some very important outcomes that will help address a number of issues such as global pandemic recovery, of course, energy transition, the digital transformation, the digital economy, and of course food and energy security.
So you've mentioned a little bit about G20. This year's G20 summit successfully produced a joint declaration, the G20 Bali Leaders Declaration. In your opinion, what are the challenges ahead? What to do next?
So we want, of course, to continue to see the great results and outcomes of the Bali summit continue. And of course, India now is the chair of the G20 process, has assumed the chair. And under that chairmanship, we would like to see ambitious goals and in a number of areas, including, for example, food and energy security, climate change and energy transition, gender equality and women empowerment. These are important themes for Canada, and we would like to continue to see those as priorities in an ambitious year for the G20 that's coming up.
One of the outcomes of the G20 for Indonesia was the Just Energy Transition Partnership, or JETP, worth $20 billion over the 3 to 5 years to finance domestic energy, clean energy projects. However, in the funding scheme, there is no certainty about the portion that Indonesia will receive, either in the form of grants or debts. Can you please explain this funding scheme so it doesn't burden Indonesia?
So first let me say that Canada very much welcome Indonesia's goal to address climate change under the Paris Agreement and to reduce greenhouse gases emission. Canada also has goals and targets under the same agreement. So for example, our main target is to reduce greenhouse gases emission between 40 to 45% by 2030. That's from 2005 levels. We also are aiming for net zero by 2050. And that's what we're doing at home, domestically, in terms of our policies and commitments. But of course, we recognize that climate change requires global solutions and also requires energy transition. And this is a challenge for all countries. How do we green our power and energy and transportation systems? This will be the key challenge for the global community. So we're very happy to engage with countries who need help, who would like some support in meeting their own commitments to reduce greenhouse gases emission. And the JETP, that's of course that was agreed to in Bali last month, is one mechanism that we can use to support Indonesia's own plans to reduce greenhouse gases emissions and to transition coal-fired power plants. Canada is very pleased to contribute financially to this and to work with Indonesia to support Indonesia's own goals.
Yeah, to achieve our own goals, Okay, moving on. One major achievement during this year's G20 summit was the establishment of a global fund dedicated to the prevention and containment of future pandemic threats. Looking at the initial total fund, amounted to $1.4 billion US. These numbers and the hype surrounding them. What exactly is a pandemic fund and how does it work?
Well, obviously the pandemic has been very hard on the global community, on Canada, and of course Indonesia has also been affected. And we've largely recovered from the effects of the pandemic. But not every country has been able to address the pandemic in the same ways. So this fund that you're referring to is an important mechanism, and Canada was very pleased to work with Indonesia and support efforts to create the fund. We're also very pleased to contribute financially to it in order to support low and middle income countries in addressing, tracking, reporting, and addressing and responding to pandemics. And this fund will be hosted by the World Bank, and we're very pleased to be part of the founding countries and contributing financially to it to help others.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador, for your time with us today.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Grace. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Demikian pemirsa perbincangan saya dengan Duta Besar Kanada untuk Indonesia, Her Excellency Nadia Burger. Sampai jumpa di International Corner episode berikutnya.